So for those of you that know me, you know I like to start most of these sessions with just coming to this space and having a nice deep breath and really recognizing that we're here showing up in service of ourself. So just take a nice deep breath, if you will, and pull those shoulders back and take that breath in and hold it for a little bit if you can. And what we're doing there is just we're working with the vagus nerve system, calming it. Those nice deep breaths activate that parasympathetic nervous system. The other nice thing about it is that it takes us to our prefrontal cortex, which does what? It's our executive functioning, so it helps us think, coordinate, and engage with our environments. So I'm just going to invite you to relax here today. You're all invited no matter how you showed up. Some of you have already had a day. Some of you are halfway through it. So just know that you're welcome here. And as we move through this topic today, please just care for self and enjoy and share your education because I know you're all valuably full of information. And Nicole, I'm going to want you to bring in as much of that star energy as you can today. So let's go ahead and have a look at some of the information that we prepared for today's talk. So we're talking about compassion under pressure, and the topic that we thought we would work on for PTS Awareness Month is really talking about navigating trauma, burnout, and in a world of overdrive. So, when we're thinking about this, we're talking about work deadlines, emotional exhaustion. We're talking about things that are happening at home. We're talking about internal numbness. And I want you to just sort of think as we go through this talk today, what really happens to our compassion for ourselves and for other people when pressure becomes chronic. And that's why we're coordinating this with PTS awareness. So we're talking about when that pressure becomes chronic and it starts to take us in a manner or a way on a daily basis that's less sustainable than what we wish. So some of the things we'll cover today, we're going to talk about understanding trauma. We're going to talk about PTS. And you'll notice I call it PTS because I don't think it's a disorder. I really think it's a nervous system reaction. And if we don't have those, then our organism doesn't remain alive. So I like to take the disorder off of it because I don't believe it is one. I actually think it's functioning perfectly the way the body was designed to work. And we're going to talk a little bit about burnout. And we're going to talk about the cost of compassion under pressure and pathways to resilience. And I like to refer to anything that exists in our body as response. So if you guys are able to bear that question, what happens to compassion for ourselves and others when pressure becomes chronic as we move throughout, then let's start this journey. So I'd like to just use an analogy a little bit here. I just want to pause for a moment and ask you, imagine, and this is imaginary for you, just imagine that you're carrying a backpack. And it's not a physical one, but it's filled with things like deadlines, worries, obligations, news alerts, unspoken emotions. And now imagine that you're climbing up a very steep hill every single day. So that's really what it can feel like in a world that never stops for us. So when we think about this pressure that seeps into the corner of life, at work, at home, and within ourselves, what happens to our compassion? Well, our compassion becomes stretched very thin. So when we think about that, what happens? We usually just keep going. But the interesting thing about what happens in this particular area is that we need something to shift. But we're becoming more irritable. We're becoming more withdrawn. We're becoming numb to our situation, dissociated, closing in, or reactive. Maladaptive behaviors show up for us. So I really just invite you to think about that again, what's happening to our compassion with this pressure? And how do we respond, not just survive? So what we really want to do is begin by understanding what's going on underneath of the surface. Hmm. So trauma isn't just about war zones or natural disasters. It's anything that overwhelms our nervous systems and our nervous system's capacity to actually cope with what's showing up on a daily basis. And it can be a single event. We know that, right? An acute event. Or it can be something that happens over time, an accumulation. We refer to those as chronic. Uh, it can be things like neglect. It can be racism. It can come from our ACE scores. It can come from adverse childhood experiences. It can come from ongoing emotional strain. And those exist in lots of different areas. If we haven't had a system that was emotionally intelligent, if we weren't raised in environments that um, demonstrated emotional intelligence, then emotional strain can become very taxing to us. So when these events are not processed, what ends up happening is that we can lead to post-traumatic stress. And post-traumatic stress is that condition where the body and the brain stay locked in survival mode. And post-traumatic stress can develop when these symptoms become persistent or they're interfering with daily life, with our relationships, and a person's ability to feel safe. Remember, we're constantly sorting for safety every day. We do that in healthy bodies. We do that in stress bodies. We're always sorting for safety. It's a natural response for us as the organisms that we are. So when we think about the ability to be able to deal with daily life, relationships, personal ability for safety, um, we can do this in a manner that pushes us to that hypervigilance on a constant basis. And when we're working with hypervigilance on a constant basis, we can move into PTS as a diagnosis. And many people live with the ripple effect of trauma. And that can happen even without a PTS diagnosis. It still can impact us. If we think a little bit about that chronic nervous system exhaustion, and we look at it, of course, here I have it on the slide as burnout. And that's not really about poor management. It's about our nervous system saying, I can't do this anymore. And to me, that's not a flaw. That's our nervous system speaking to us, telling us what it needs. So I think about burnout as our nervous system saying, I can't do this anymore. This is chronic stress. So we're moving into this place of being stressed more than being calm. And it traps us in this survival mode. I don't know if any of you have experienced this on the call today, but I'd wager a guess there has been moments in your life that you have moved into that chronic stress and your nervous system has gone into full response mode. The other thing is the body doesn't distinguish between what happens to be acute or, say, for instance, a car accident and 100 micro stressors. The response is going to be the same. So even though we might look at it and go, well, I don't know. I've had clients say, well, I don't know. I really shouldn't have PTS because I wasn't at a war zone. I haven't experienced any incredibly extreme trauma. I haven't worked in environments that found myself being extended to beyond a response. But the thing that we have to remember in a daily life that we live, in the environments that we show up in, these are micro stressors. And that's when we can have that complex, layers of what's happening to us, layers of what's showing up and what exists in front of us on a daily basis. And those can be equally as stressful. And that's what pushes us into that hypervigilance, if you will. So we stay stuck in that hypervigilance or we go flat, shutting down, feeling detached. So this is what I refer to as living in overdrive. And when we think about that, we want to also recognize that, compassion fatigue is not a failure of empathy. It's a signal from the system being pushed beyond its threshold. Now, I think about that as a great positive in my life. I'm one of those people that think we can only work with things if we have an awareness of them. So when my body's telling me that I'm pushing into beyond or over its threshold, then I have the ability to respond in a manner that's going to assist it and not continue to overwhelm it. And I know there's a lot of social structures that are set up in our system globally that can keep us in a space of thinking that we must pursue and go on. So it's just something to think about. It's a sign that we've been giving without receiving, so to speak. So if we think a little bit more, if we're looking at this pressure, if we're looking at what this pressure does to compassion, compassion is this beautiful thing. It's our capacity to be with suffering. It's our capacity to be with caring. It's our capacity to be in spaces, but it's not unlimited. This is the thing. We want to understand that this is not a never flowing fountain from us. We have to take responsibility to fill our cup. It needs safety. That's no surprise for me. Compassion needs to be safe in order to be managed with other people and with ourselves, because we're constantly sorting for safety. And when we live in fight, flight, or freeze all the time for too long, often it happens in PTS. We know that. It's one of the symptoms. There's several symptoms. In the DSM-5, there's almost 400 symptoms that are actually marked that we go with PTS. So it's one of those things that if we see it in PTS, if we see it in unresolved trauma, compassion begins to dissolve or dry up. And of course, anyone that has seen me speak in other places knows that I love compassion. It's the love child of empathy and action. And I love empathy too. It's wonderful to have it. But compassion says, I'm willing to do something to move forward. And that to me is a really special place to be. So in workplaces, this can look like emotional shutdown. It can look like moral injury. And if for those who might not know what moral injury is when we are working against our core values and belief systems. For instance, people that may be in service to us, they may be doing actions and seeing things of humanity that they wish they never saw or that they wish they never had to do. And it was a requirement of what they had been hired for and what they're giving back in service. And that's what we refer to as moral injury. It's where the value system and our actions do not match. And that can be quite suffering to an individual. I also think about the toxic productivity that we live under. And what I mean by that is that it's the pay, not the passion, that pushes us forward. It's the necessities. We're always doing, we're never feeling. Now, I always find that quite interesting in our lives. We are always doing, we're never feeling. And meanwhile, what are we? We are mammals that feel first and action second. We're built of a thalamus. The thalamus is our emotional center. Everything that we do is feeling: visual, auditory, kinesthetic, olfactory, gustatory. What is that doing? It's feeling our environments. Is it safe? Is it not safe? Should I move? Should I not move? Should I run? Is that person smiling or not smiling? Can I engage or take shelter? Interesting, right? So we've managed to get to this place where we're constantly doing but never feeling. So it's quite different for us now moving into this new global world where my hope is that we start feeling more and making educated decisions about what's happening as opposed to always doing. And that's where compassion falls into place, because what does it do? It's empathy with action. It is the feeling and doing. Thinking about a few people I should send a note to about that. So at home, it can show up as caregiver burnout. We see that. If you've ever experienced that, it's quite drawing. It's emotional disconnection, a silence in the trauma. It's exhausting sometimes. That can be a huge emotional overload for us. And internally, of course, what is it? It's the inner critic. It's that loud voice, the shame, the self-blame. I'm not good enough. I deserve this to happen. So it's really interesting thinking about these things. These internal patterns are common in those living with PTS. Trauma causes us to lose our sure-footedness. Doesn't mean we can't get it back, but it gives us a place where we feel unsure. Our body's reacting against what we think it should do. So these are even small daily demands that can feel completely overwhelming when we are dealing with chronic stress, PTS, trauma. And some of these things come up for us. It's a nice reminder. Where's our compassion in this pressure? So what does it mean to actually respond with compassion instead of just surviving it? You know, that's where I love us to set, right? I'm possibility driven in my work. Moving the human spirit has always been, Susan and I have always had the conversation around being possibility driven in our coaching practices, in the work that we do with organizations, in the trauma-informed training, compassionate leadership, and all the works that we've done with First Nations, first responders. It's always been about possibility and understanding that everyone that we work with has more inside of them than what they realize. So, and the other thing is to really think about resilience isn't just grit. It's not just get over it and move on. It's not what was the statement that people used to say? Uh, pull up your bootstrings, or there's other ones I know, but I'm aging myself there, of course. But these are things that we think of, and it's like, well, wait a second. Uh, Resilience is really a rational and biological capacity. And when I start thinking about resilience as that, I find it much more interesting. It's not just mental toughness. It lives in the body, and the more that we learn about somatics, the more that we look at trauma work, what do we look at? We're attaching the brain to the rest of the body. We're also looking at the heart and the gut. Now, who thought we could do that? Certainly not when we were moving in action all the time and we weren't feeling. You just have to be a head on a skeleton walking around, as long as you can think your way through it. So thinking about this, it's really about learning how to, if we're recovering from PTS, if we're working through trauma, if we're working in environments, we need to learn to re-engage with the body in safe ways. And that's some of what I think about, what I'm trying to propose here. It's like we're looking at these ways of somatic. We're looking at the connection. We know that it's key, and we look at those through grounding. You know, we can do different exercises that assist us within the moment. Notice 5 things you see, 4 things you can touch, 3 things you hear. We know that we can do breath work. I always talk to people about it being the first thing that happens. We know that breath will happen, even when the body is overwhelmed. And if we've ever heard of the faint or feign, it's like the body's just resetting its nervous system. Breath is our first way out. It helps us get back into the presence so we can breathe our way through things. We're orientating, letting our eyes scan the room. Is anything here unsafe? Those are grounding techniques that we can use, reminding our body that it's okay and it's in a safe space. The other thing is co-regulation and connection. Even one safe relationship can regulate us. Your nervous system will be supported and it'll help us recover from trauma. if we can co-regulate or have connections. That's why we say trauma doesn't heal by itself. It needs a part of society. It needs to be with people. We need to have connections, and we need to be able to co-regulate. The other thing that we talk about a little bit is trying to move from surviving to responding, is for us to be able to make sure and understand boundaries that we live with, saying no, limiting exposure to harm. These are acts of compassion. Oh, I don't want to upset anyone. Meanwhile, we're frazzled. It's not as healthy a way to go forward. So being able to use these boundaries and use them compassionately for ourselves, and especially those that have an imprint or have a diagnosis of PTS. Not a disorder. It's a nervous system response. So compassion grows not from pushing through, but from learning how to source ourselves and each other. Resources. So when we think about, after exploring some of these things today that we've been talking about, I'm being mindful of my time for you guys. When we think about some of the things that we're discussing, we have a few questions that we can look at. Where in your life do you feel the most pressure right now? What a simple question for us. Where do I feel the most pressure? What one small act of compassion towards yourself or someone else might loosen the grip of that pressure? Two great questions to think about. And the third one is, what would it feel like to live just a little less in overdrive? So what one practice can we begin using today? So as we think about this, I really want to open up this idea. Are there any questions? Does anyone want to have a comment or thoughts on what it is that we're talking about today? Any input, knowledge to give to all of us? I see some of the comments, yeah. Adriana says, I personally find it helpful to look at the tiny things and reflect that approach in the language we use with ourselves and others too. Yeah, so true. So I really think what I hope to get across with chatting with you all today is that compassion is not a soft skill. It's a survival skill for humanity and a vital one for those navigating PTS and trauma. And that's a really good place for us to start. Again, a place from empathy and action. We can have empathy for sure. We know that we do. And of course, if you guys, I'm going to just leave this and then turn off my slides so that we can have further conversation for those that want. But please reach out to us. Have a look at both our sites, traumainformedcoaching.com and movingthehumanspirit.com. And obviously, you can reach out to me at any time if you have any questions, insights, or concerns. And thank you all for showing up and being present here today. And I'm going to hang out if there's any further questions, insights that we can talk about. Any questions or insights, thoughts or feelings? Yeah, Leslie.
Thank you. I wasn't sure how to put my hand up electronically, so I appreciate you seeing me.
I'm an
Um,
eagle eye when it comes to that.
thank you. I mean, this is a really important topic for sure, and I just keep seeing and noticing in myself the level of tiredness that exists. And so I think, from the overdrive, the working, all the things that we're responsible for, caregiving, household stuff, all of it. And it's just a really great reminder that the rest piece is like it's more than just a good night's sleep to me. And I'm just playing with myself. Like, well, what is it that I need to feel resourced? So I just thought that that might be a helpful piece, or
Yeah,
it's
it's a nice awareness, isn't it, Leslie, when we can actually ask ourselves, what is it that I need to give back? Especially, I find this with the caregiving or in service mentality, which
mhm.
a lot of us have because you're here today. And we're always interested in learning more about it. So even if we know it or not, our subconscious is working in service of other. And sometimes as a result of that, we lose sight of what it is that we might need the most in the moment. And it's interesting when I do work with people that actually experience that, the conversation that they have is they oftentimes will look at what more can I do for who else I'm serving, as opposed to looking at how else can I serve myself, you know? And that's an interesting thing. So yes, I agree. It's like, yes, how can we ourselves impact what's happening to us? Because as we say, who controls you? Well, I control me. Who do we control? Just ourselves. Any other thoughts or questions? I've seen a comment here too. I wanted to see. Lisa said she recently had the honor to be with mother-in-law as she was passing, and the relevance of breath as a place to begin for this work, and how hard wired it is, even when we are not willful. It's really hitting hard. It's true. Yeah. Thank you, Lisa. So beautiful, hey? What a wonderful experience to be able to move through that piece of life. It's such a wonderfully important piece of it. Um, and what else did I see here? Yes, I think our entire society is there. We can see it ourselves first and provide the ripple effect to others. Yes. And it's interesting, when we show up and demonstrate. When I have people come to me about parenting, I say a funny thing because I'm not a parent myself, but I have a lot of children around us. I'm fortunate that way. I don't have to pay for their college careers, so very fortunate. But what I will say is if you are worried about how you're showing up, you just have to show up the way that you want your child to be. So show up the way that you want them to be as an adult person. So we lead, show by leadership, show by action, show by modeling what it is we want to be. So back to the comment, when I think, it's the ripple effect in others. Yeah, we want to show up and demonstrate and model this in our lives. So it's sort of like, if we're just the ones saying you should do it. I remember having a person used to say to me, tell you what I tell do what I tell you to do, not as I do. And I always thought that was a very odd statement. Do as I tell you to do, not as I do. So you could imagine how committed I was to doing what they thought I should do. So yeah, it's really about modeling how we do this. What else do we have here? Miriam, hi, it's so nice to see your face. In a world where I am so overworked and overdrive, I tend to forget I can pause and rest. Yeah, and I'm so animated all the time that even the thought of rest and pause feels dangerous. Yes, so remember what you're talking about there, Miriam, is a coping response to stress and overwhelm, right? So that's when we move into this place where it feels unsafe to slow down. Interesting. And I hear that a lot. Yes, thank you. So nice to see you. And Eva says, one of the most powerful pieces of work, oops, just shot away on me. There it is. One of the most powerful pieces of work I've found is to nurture relationship with self as a priority. My goodness, how healing that's been over the years and still in motion. Yeah, and Eva, is it Ava? It's Ava,
It's
not Eva.
Eva. Hi.
Eva, I was right. Thank you.
Yeah,
How are
yeah,
you?
yeah.
It's nice to see you.
Good. It's nice to see you too.
What is your question? I'll let you read it.
Yeah, I mean, my question is also around we're learning so much more around complex PTS as well. And I think, and as much of what you're sharing today, and as I'm working with people with complex PTS and PTS,
Yep.
and can relate myself as well, all of what you've shared, I'm just head nodding, lots of alignment and resonance. And I'm curious from your point of view too, is there any other nuance you would add or edit or build on from what you shared today when we think about complex PTS?
I'll throw it out for all of us. So if anyone has comments too, when I think about complex, what we're talking about is the layering effect, right? It's not only making the cake, but putting layers of icing on top of it. And I'm using a sweet term there because otherwise it's not sweet at all. So what we're talking about, of course, just to we're thinking about ACE scores, we're thinking about impacts, environments, we're thinking about experiences, we're talking about trauma imprints, we're talking about dysfunctional relationships, and we're talking about them all existing in one space, which is
It's a big
really,
cake. It's
really
a really big,
intense.
complicated cake.
Right,
Yeah.
yes, which because your body of work has really been around some of the complex pieces of it. So when I think about that, and I know this might sound, I don't want it to sound light, but one of the things that I've been finding in helping people back themselves out of those dark places is really having the understanding of authenticity and who they are. Because what happens in trauma is that we lose sight of who we are, who we thought we were, the narrative that we've created for self sometimes gets really shaken when it comes to trauma. So I think one of the things that we can do is really go back to our roots, if you will, and really start thinking about values and beliefs, core values, the things that really ground us, the belief systems that might not be serving us. But really I find them doing a lot of authenticity work with people that are backing themselves out of that. And I'm working with someone, I'm saying this because I was with her this week, and she's like, God, I have no identity. I've been the
Yes.
caregiver. I've gone through the PTS. I have secondary PTS. The children are raised. The list goes on. And it's like, and she had what Miriam was saying. She's like, I termed it, we better look busy. Someone's coming. But it's like your response is that I have to constantly be going.
Yeah.
So we're working on who are you authentically, and that is starting to reason I start there. I'm playing with the values and beliefs,
Yeah.
but we're starting with authenticity because what it ends up doing is, because it's an internal search and not an external validation, is that it's starting to calm our nervous system.
Yeah.
And I can't pinpoint why that is. I think it's because once we find ourselves, we find a way out. But so that would be one nuance I would say. Play with authenticity. And
Yeah, that's really validating because I'm playing with authenticity and lots of work on identity, with a periphery of a dose or a bit of icing of adult development, and noticing a real thread of grief
yes, interesting, right?
in order to sort of move into a place of where we can even explore authenticity and identity and context and soma, which sort of gets into Carolyn Coughlin's work. But I so appreciate you saying what you're saying. It's really validating and really grounding in some of the direction of some of which my work is taking place. So thank you.
Beautiful.
Yeah,
Keep up that
thank
good
you.
work. Yeah.
Thank you.
I
Yeah.
find if we're not sure and we don't know who we are, then it's very difficult for us to make decisions, coordinate a plan moving forward. So
Mhm.
beautiful.
Thank
Good
you.
work, Eva. Uh, Adriana.
Sure, Brad. Thanks a lot.
Oh,
I
nice
mean,
to see you.
I took a lot of notes and I'm really happy to be here. I would have like a short sharing about compassion fatigue or what has helped me. I'll just clarify, while I did train as a coach with moving the human spirit, I'll speak here more as a friend, a supporter, where of course coaching helps, but where I was not coaching actively people, but supporting in different ways. And so a few points there. So what's happening right now is that, for example, I'm supporting someone who is in a really difficult place, also tried to die by suicide. So we're talking about like hard moments, and I'm upholding the connection, and it's like it's a friend. I will not share more, obviously for confidentiality reasons.
Thank you.
But what happens to me is that, you know, I mean, I'm also going through lots of stuff, lots of stress, and for example, maybe this person or someone else might call me. So they might call me like, hey, and I've learned that while part of me would, I don't know if necessarily go into rescue mode, but in any case, like be a bit more kind of reactive in that moment and be like, okay, I need to take this call, it might be urgent, or whatever, like I should be for that person. I, with time, learned to understand that, you know, I need first we clarify the code for when it's really urgent, so I know when to pick up and when something is really important, and this works really well. And then understood, you know, to do something about this compassion fatigue is that I really need to think about, obviously, I'm saying something obvious here, but you know, what can I give? Or am I ready to listen to the person? Or is my day completely fucked up right now? Is maybe tomorrow better? And so to really propose something and figure it out in the stage before the distancing or the potential resentment or anything, emotional drawback from my side, anything happens because I want to give, and I am giving, and I'm giving kind of consistently, and I'm giving long term. So this is kind of a thing of, okay, just if someone calls me, it doesn't mean that I have to answer, especially if we have an agreement there and I know, you know,
Right.
what is going on. And what I also can share is that when I have certain conversations, I repeat, it's not a coaching conversation, although certainly coaching skills help. What I do is that I sometimes write myself, you know, how do I want to be myself kind of in this moment? Because sometimes, you know, you go into this situation and the person is like talking. And for me, for example, last time I wrote, oh, doesn't matter with whom, but someone I was supporting, like generous, pragmatic, and determined. And these were like my 3 words that somehow helped me to be me and to be present. The thing I wanted to share this in terms of compassion fatigue, and maybe something else that helps me personally is certain books that I keep on my nightstand and that help me show up. Personally, one of them is called There Is No Good Card for This: What to Say and Do When Life is Scary, Awful, and Unfair to People You Love by Kelsey Grove and Emily McDowell. I'm not sure if someone knows it, but it's really helpful to show up and
Yeah,
to...
I've heard of that book, and you know, whatever you say right now, I'm going to make you write it in the chat so that we have record. So yeah, put the name of the book in chat because I'm sure we would love it. And sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, don't worry. I'll be fine. I just have like one last point. I'm gonna shut up. And this might be very kind of related to my reality, so not everyone might live it like that. But anyway, so I'm also a writer, and I'm mentioning this because I also have like trauma and loss and so on in my life. And what I'm doing right now is that, for example, I'm finishing a text about connection and what helped me, you know, really difficult moment of loss. Why am I
Yep.
mentioning this? Because this was a long process for me to figure out, you know, not just process certain trauma and how people did not show up for me, but also to understand why was this one person or these 2 people, 3 people in my life, were they so helpful? And so I found words for what worked well, even if they were not perfect people at all. And then I just realized that so this was me on the receiving end, and now maybe it's me on the giving end. And I am supporting people, and to like really integrate the worlds and to remember, okay, wow, um this helped me in the sense that, okay, this person was maybe honoring the magnitude of what I was going through, was not minimizing me, and whatever. Sorry, I'm not really good at explaining this right now, but to kind of see myself as the giver and the receiver and play, you know, just it's a ping pong. It's all part of the same story, and to so really learn what I learn and pay attention to when I'm being a receiver, learn and pay attention when I'm being a giver, and connect it all and do my best to show up.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
And also, I just want to, the last comment, I loved everything you said. I have so many things to say, but I won't because of our time. But I wanted to say one of the signs of post-traumatic growth is if we've moved through and we now want to contribute to someone else. And you said that there. You weren't sure why these other people showed up and how, and now you want to play it forward. So that's post-traumatic growth. When we get to a place where we feel healthy enough to be able to give back, that means we've really Doesn't mean we're ever stopped. You know, my comment on that. It's like they'll light a tow or throw dirt on me before I'm done. But it's like it's always a practice. But that's recognition. So give yourself a pat on the back for that. Thank you for that. Joy, thank you so much for your patience with that beautiful. I love that, all this conversation. So
Yeah, I love to listen, so it's all good. One thing that I'm finding, which is really interesting and unique, is that although COVID is a trigger for a lot of people, but it was almost like a reset for individuals,
yeah,
right? From that hypervigilance and not go, 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 go all the time.
yeah,
And so now, as we reintroduce it, a lot of people are realizing that that is not how they wanted to. And so when you don't have the words or the thing, different feelings or understand that, I think that's why a lot of people are feeling unsettled with the now because they had opportunity to basically reset and bring it down. And all of a sudden now, as people are ramping it up, it doesn't feel good. It doesn't feel comfortable and they want to change. So
right.
I find it fascinating that although the word, I won't say it again, causes triggers for people, it also is a way in which people are had an opportunity to reconnect with themselves and
Yeah,
realize that being hyper vigilant or being in a way where you're numbing is not how you want to feel. And so the work that's happening in trauma informed, especially for individuals that are high level, high functioning people in performance wise, are finding that with the support of a coach, it's enabling them to talk things out in a way that's safe and they have space so that they can figure things out. Right. I
yeah,
talk way too
agreed. Love that. So the interesting thing you're talking about, you know, when COVID happened, I saw a lot of people who were confused by the responses they were giving. And what the responses they were giving is that, okay, you've been shut out from your family, from groups of people. You can't socialize. There's a threat. Yeah, you have to be safe going to the grocery store. So this sickness really caused a global awareness. So that's the thing you were talking about. You're like, okay, there was a choice here for us to be aware or not to be aware. So what happens is people were coming to me and going, I have no idea what's going on. So I went to the grocery store and I'm like freaking out on people, or I'm at the gas station and I'm freaking out on people. Well, those are old coping skills that we haven't used for years. They're things that kept us safe when we were children. And now they have resurfaced because there has become a global threat. And in the global threat, what do? Our body doesn't forget. The hippocampus has it stored. All it's doing is I'm sensing this is a shit show here. So I'm going to have to pull something out. And what is that? That's fight, flight, or freeze. So yes, I agree with you. And it's interesting. And especially what's happening globally. You know, people are feeling unsafe. So of course, we're going to see a greater command of hypervigilance. And we all know what happens in hypervigilance. We either dorsal vagal or we hypervigilance. It's like we're going to go fight, flight, or freeze. So beautiful. Yes, I talk a lot about the impact of what COVID had on us and what it brought out of people again. And I agree with you. If they work with trauma informed coaches or anyone that's trauma informed and have the knowledge and the nervous system and that kind of education, it's such a way forward. Our body is doing exactly what it was built to do. But what do we think? Socially, it doesn't look right and it feels uncomfortable, so it must be wrong. No, it's doing what it was built to do. So good, Joy. Nice connection for sure. Um, any other comments or thoughts? Thank you, Jewel. She might be gone already. See, she's stepping away. Thoughts, insights.
Just looking through the chat here, Brad, and Darlene was having, I don't know if Darlene is still here. She might be. Yes, she is. She has a question about like grief and perceived loss of identity. When it's a little bit up, if you scroll up there, we can maybe address some of that.
Okay. I'm just trying to, okay.
Darlene, if you want to speak on that, you're free to come off the mic if you'd like.
Yeah, for some reason it's not letting me roll on my scroll.
Uh, can you read it? It says, does the grief come in because of the perceived loss of who we think we are or should be when we are searching and rediscovering for our authentic self? I think grief is a big part of.
Yeah, well, I think I understand the question. Is that what you're saying? Grief is that injection, and how does that relate to how we show up on the stage every day, showing up the way that we think other people want to see us versus suddenly being authentic and moving into ourself? And there is a grief in that, right? There's an old saying called, we have to at any moment be ready to sacrifice who we are for who we can become, because the true tragedy in life is not death itself, but what dies inside of us while we live. And I think about that with ego, which is a big part of our identity, right? So I do think that there is a grieving of who we were, but also an excitement in who we can become. So I always think the most lively times in my life were the times that I didn't know what was going to happen next, but I grabbed a hold of the horse and rode it out of town. So it's one of those interesting things where we get complacent in who we think we are. And Miriam was talking about it, and someone else was talking about it, the exhaustion you experience in showing up the way that you believe other people want to see you. And that truly is one of the hugest things that we deal with in any type of work that when we're working with the public. They'll be talking about the experience of exhaustion in what they're doing. And I often think about it because what we do is we keep our authentic self hidden, and we show up the way that we think other people want to see us. And we, years ago, when I was doing work, not in this realm, it was a different one. We used to refer to it as being caught in the looking good. So we did a lot of work around being caught in the looking good, and why is it important to us? What's the ego and identity that shows up? Um, you know, and I understand it. I want to be accepted. I don't want to be rejected from the group. I want to feel like I'm part of something. There's lots of stuff. I mean, it's a human trait. So, but yes, there's a grief, one that hopefully is embraced by an excitement. So, and grief sometimes is misunderstood. When I hear grief, I think it can be a release and a reset. I think someone else was talking about that. So it's like if we reframe how we look at grief and we look at it as a reset for what comes next. Oftentimes, people that go through this stuff, you'll hear them refer to it as a rebirth. So I think about that as a pretty exciting thing. But grief is definitely a part of it. Grief's a wonderful part of life. We get to release, let go, and reset nervous systems based on what we're losing. And then we get to regenerate a new path forward. So that's always exciting. And Darlene, I don't know if that answered your question, but thank you for bringing that question up. Nicole, thanks for your patience.
This is golden. I'm so appreciative. Um, and speaking of that process of that transition of, becoming after BTS, like there's this exhaustion. It's like the nervous system keeps going even though you are in rest in some aspects. In the slide, there was a portion of boundaries, that empathy and action. How does that work when you're in that transition and your nervous system is still thinking it's in survival mode? You're doing everything to kind of ground, relax, um, ready to become, transition to that rebirth. But there's this gap between that empathy and action, that boundary, that like fierce self compassion to get there, that resistance.
Mm-hmm. Core alignment. So for me, when I think about any time that we're talking about trying to make a step between two spaces, especially when what's happening is we're creating a space that's unknown to us, right? So a lot of the work that we're doing, we're creating space for people that is unknown to them. So we're saying, what do you have? I have this. I have this reactiveness. What do you want to do? I don't want to have this reactiveness. Great. So what do we want instead? We want the opposite of the reactiveness. And what is the opposite of it? Peace, calm. You know, most often that's what people will say. I just want peace. It's love, it's peace, it's calm. Great. So what we have to do is we have to go in and really think about the core alignment that we can develop or experience as people. And in doing that, what we're asking is we're asking the person of what they really need. So you might say to me, I'll just use this as an example. You might come to me and say, I don't want to have anxiety. I want to experience something different. And I would say, this is short and sweet, but I would say if you weren't experiencing anxiety, what would you be experiencing? And you might say joy. And I would say, then just what's underneath of joy? Then what would you experience? And you might say, well, you know, freedom. Okay. And if you had freedom, what's just underneath of that? So we keep going into it and going, the reality is that your body's intention, why anxiety shows up, is that it has the deeper peace. Because our bodies can't tell. All we're doing is we are constantly in sorting for safety. Our eyes, even though it sees stuff and puts it together, still doesn't know what goes on out here. Our brain has no clue. It's just sensing what's happening. So if I sense something that feels unsafe, whether it's a threat or a perceived threat, it's going to react the same. So we want to know what is the body's intention for us. And if we go into a core alignment and it ends up saying, well, the intention is just that I want to be loved or I want to be with peace, then we get to say to it, and this is the step between the empathy and compassion, we get to say, thank you for having that intention for me. There's no threat out here. We do a scan. I was talking, I think I talked about it today. Might talk about it too much, but we do a scan in the environment. And we say, is that chair safe? Is the desk safe? Are the people around me? Are they threatening? And then we thank our body for that intention because that is what our body's supposed to do. So that sometimes can move us through that empathy to action step, if you will. Does that have a sense about answering your question, or is there another piece of it that I'm missing? Because sometimes I talk around in a circle.
No, that's definitely an avenue. Um, Especially like it's like life after trauma getting to that post-traumatic growth. Um, there is a sense of exhaustion, that pressure of like, well, here's my new life. You know, I'm forming this new identity, but I don't want to necessarily feel the pressure that I did when I was, you know, wearing a mask to get there. So the body still probably feels that oh, well, that means I'm going to work hard again to like build the life that I want, thinking it was going to be like before, but you still, there is work involved. So there's like, I noticed that the nervous system self protects itself, not wanting to feel that over burnout anymore, trying to please everyone, trying to live in someone else's narrative. And then, oh, great, I have to start again, you know, and the body self protects, the brain self protects. So that empathy to get there to the, you know, to get there to start that post traumatic growth is where I've seen people feel so exhausted and burnt
Yeah.
out with pressure.
You know, what's interesting too, you click something in what you're saying, because we also want to remember that there's two types of stress. There's distress and there's eustress. And distress is not so good for us, but eustress is the one that promotes us moving forward. So sometimes being really curious with people around what it is they're experiencing, because both of them are exhausting. So the eustress is the one I used to experience it years ago when I ran. I was a runner. And every time I went to get up to that start line, my body would go into a stress response, which it needed to do in order to push adrenaline through me to get ready to run the race. But in my head, it's a positive experience, but it didn't not make my hands sweat or make me shake a little bit or make me feel like, you know, all of that running to the bathroom before the race starts. All of the experience was the same, but it was a positive stress. So sometimes I talk to clients about making sure that we've identified whether this movement to new person or new identity or, the new narrative. When they say, I don't want to do it, it's stressful. And it's like, but is it a useful stress or is it a distress? So, just bearing that in mind, it's kind of a rethought or a refix of what's happening. Something to play with, right, Nicole? Oh, you guys have been so fantastic. So we're coming up to the top of the hour. Any last questions? Any comments?
There was a question in the chat from Wendy. Does I have a client who is numb? Wendy, if you're still here, I don't know if you want to come off mic and talk about it or ask Brad directly. I see that you are
Here.
there. Yeah.
Yeah, so I was just wondering about this client that I have that is completely numb. She has PTS and she is either unwilling or unable to increase her awareness around when she beats herself up, which just takes her further down into this hole. And so I just wondered if you had any input on how to get her thinking about getting out of this hole.
When you are working with her and she goes down this hole, is it about self-talk?
Uh, sometimes it's about self-talk. Mostly, I would say it is. Yeah.
Okay. So it sounds like, and this is just you and I talking, it sounds to me like there's some work to be done around her belief system about not being good enough, about not, that's where I would start. I'm really
Right.
curious. I hear every time that you seem to move into this space of, you and I know, the dorsal vagal and being gone. I'm really curious every time you move into that space, you seem to put weight on yourself or you seem to comment negatively about yourself. I'm curious, where did that come from? Did you give it to yourself or did someone else give it to you?
Right.
I'd be really, as you and me as a coach, I'd be really curious what she has to say about that.
Right.
Sometimes we can use these comments or this belief system we have about ourselves to lack moving forward. And why wouldn't we? If someone told me I was always XYZ and I was a little kid and I grew up believing I was always XYZ and I'm not good enough and you're stupid and you're not going to make the team and you couldn't punch your way out of a wet paper bag. Well, maybe that's too much information from my life. But it's like all of these things we look at and I go, okay, well, my first way in with that client, because I will honestly say, and this is transparency, working in the dorsal vagal, working in the numb dissociated state, I have found sometimes is more challenging than working in hypervigilant states because we're well practiced at that. And to be able to reverse that extreme parasympathetic response can be challenging. But if she has words around it, like you just said, she has words around it when she goes in there and she starts pummeling herself or beating herself up. That to me is a belief system that she's created either for survival so that she can stay numb and not have to, because she can't protect herself, or someone gave her that belief. So that would be a great piece of work to do with her, or to just be curious about. Like, I'm curious where that came from is what I would maybe say.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Brad.
Yeah, I'd love to hear how it goes too, Wendy. Any other comments, thoughts? Adriana, thank you so much for the information. Thank you so much for good, Susan. It was nice to see you. Well, thank you guys all so much for being here today. I really appreciate you taking the time and showing up. Again, if you have any questions, please reach out to us. Charles, Susan, myself, our emails are all the same except for the names. Charles at movingthehumanspirit.com, Susan at movingthehumanspirit.com, and Brad, well, no, it's just Brad, but Brad at movingthehumanspirit.com. So thank you so much. Take care. Have a fantastic weekend, everyone.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Fine.